Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is episode 13, and I'm talking to Maureen Germain about her class that she teaches for mental health issues. We go into great depth about how she handles it, including the acquisition of a mentor to help her with the many different issues that occur in this class. Hello, I'm interviewing Maureen Germain today about how she is combining yoga with her counseling skills to support good mental health and optimum brain health. She has been a student of yoga for many years and a yoga teacher for 6 years. She is currently teaching yoga classes, and one in particular is to help manage stress, anxiety, and depression. Welcome, Maureen. I'm really glad to talk to you about this subject.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Would you like to add anything else to that introduction that people might want to know about you or that you would like to share?
I am a social worker by qualification. I graduated in the very early 90s, and it was while I was a student of social work that I first was introduced to yoga. And initially I did it for my own mental health and well-being, and just knew how powerful it was as a tool, particularly for depression and particularly for the stress. And I've kind of gone full circle. I now work at a university here in South Australia, and I have, I guess, the privilege of sharing yoga with students who are currently studying and helping them with their mental health and well-being, and seeing the benefits that it has, not only for mental health and well-being, but for concentration and ability to focus your energies. So it's been a lovely journey.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. I have vague memories of my uni, but it can be very stressful. So, and I was kind of wondering about those classes, if you could explain them, because I would think, and I could be totally wrong here, that younger people who are fit and young will want a fairly intense class. And is that what you provide, or are you're really trying to get them to do the more subtle, shall we say, aspects of yoga, like breathing and meditation? Or
Absolutely. And we do have a gym on campus, and the gym does offer yoga classes. And so I guess the classes that I offer are very different, and we call them mindful yoga. And so we kind of distinguish, and I make sure that anyone who comes, I talk to them beforehand, and I get an understanding of why they're there. But I also take the opportunity to explain that it's not a fitness-based yoga, that it's not the sort of yoga that you would find in the gym, and that it has a very different focus, and that focus is a more meditative focus, but we do it via movement. So we do some stillness and some sitting, but we combine the meditation with the movement. So it's a very it's a very different flavour, I guess, to classes that are held elsewhere on campus. And so people are understanding of that and very supportive of that.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. I was kind of wondering how that all worked together, but you
and it's the class is a very interesting class because I have young students, but we also have a range of mature age students. And we also have a range of students with disabilities. So, for example, last week I had someone in a wheelchair. Who actually was able to get down onto the floor but I had two people who are mature age students with back injuries, and they chose to do the whole class on chairs. And then I had a range of younger people who don't perhaps have the any physical impairments, but still really enjoy the gentle flowing nature of the class. So there's a variety, I guess, of physical things that people bring into the room, as well as emotional and mental health things that are there. So it's a very interesting class.
It must be a very interesting class to teach, because there'd be so many different things that you would be taking into consideration, shall we say, as you're teaching.
Yeah, it's a challenging class, and I think I have started having some mentoring around this class in particular, which I found really, really useful, particularly because I want it to be an effective class. I want it to be accessible and I want it to be effective. And I think it's really useful then to have conversations with other yoga teachers. And so I have a relationship with a teacher in the US called Christine Kaveri-Weber, who teaches subtle yoga. And she's agreed to be my mentor. And so I Skyped with her recently to talk about this class. And it was really useful just to have that time to sit back and reflect as a teacher. And, one of the first things she said was, wow, this is a really challenging class. And it's just, useful to have that feedback. That actually, yes, it is a challenging class because there's such a wide variety of people who come. And, often it's not there are a core group of regulars, but often there are very new people as well. So you've got that, I guess, added complexity with somebody who's never done yoga before. We have a lot of international students as well. So there's a lot of, I guess, range of understandings about what yoga is. So every week I'm having to reiterate, I guess, where I'm coming from and what this class is about.
That sounds like a very difficult class. Do you think that people come in with a really wide variety of goals too, things that they want to achieve?
I think so, but I think the mental health and well-being is a common goal that most of the students would have. Certainly that's how it's billed, I guess, and that's what there's a lot of referrals because I'm in the counselling service. So there is a lot of referrals from my colleagues. So it really is promoted for good mental health. So I guess most people, and it's in a lovely space as well. It's in a space called Oasis, which is a wellbeing centre at the university. So I guess it has some scaffolding around it, which really kind of encourages it to be seen as a class that is for your mental wellbeing. So it's not in the gym. It's not in the same room as where the other classes are held. So there really is a distinction there. So I guess that is a kind of common thread is that, everybody has that need to centre themselves, to take care of themselves while they're studying, to give themselves a little bit of breathing space. So I think there's a commonality there that works regardless of where you're at physically.
Do you go into say deeper into the yogic philosophy with this class, because they are not taking it primarily for the physical issues, but really to work on their mental health? So are you talking about yamas, niyamas, kleshas, those kinds of things, or is that not appropriate for that group?
I do, but probably not in an in-depth way. The yamas and the niyamas are important, I think, for every class that I do. And I always make reference in some way to, some of those teachings, whether it be, truthfulness and working from where you're at. Those things just inform my teaching on a regular class-to-class basis. So I don't really go in depth into the philosophy in this class. And it's primarily because it's a 45-minute class and it's a very diverse range of people. So it really is more about breathing and connecting with yourself. So the philosophy is, I guess, it underlies what I do, but it's not necessarily the main focus. Whereas some of my other classes that I teach, I certainly would go more in depth into the philosophy. In my general evening class that I do.
You said on your Facebook page that, and maybe we could get a little bit into that because I think this is something you referred to earlier about having a mentor. Explain that a little bit more. I mean, what do you feel that the benefits are? And you've actually chosen someone from the U.S. So
I was just going to explain my choice of mentor was Christine. I met several years ago when she was in Australia, and she was coming and going to Byron Bay to do a workshop on the chakras. And at that time I was really interested but couldn't get to Byron Bay. And I sent her a very cheeky little email that went, "You're not happening to come to Adelaide, are you? Because if so, I'd love to, go to this workshop and, could you come here and do it for me?" And it just so happened that she was coming with her family for just a couple of days just to check out Adelaide. And she said, "Sure, I'm going to be there for a couple of days. If you can get some people together, I'll run this workshop." And she actually ended up staying, her and her husband and her son, who is the same age as my youngest twin boys that I have, ended up staying with us. And we had a lovely couple of days. And the workshop, I got, 20 people or so together, and we all really enjoyed it. And so I've kept that connection, I guess, to Christine. So she was, I guess, my choice when I thought about mentoring because I really enjoy what she teaches. She really focuses on those subtle practices, on a breath-centered practice, and she also focuses on mental health, so the anxiety and depression. So I guess it was the connection I had with her from years ago, but it was also her connection and her commitment to yoga as a mental health and wellbeing practice that really kind of went, yeah, this makes sense for me to connect with her more regularly and talk about my teaching.
What kinds of things do you guys talk about? I mean, is it basically about your classes or?
Well, it is. I mean, it is an arrangement that's just started, so I guess it will evolve too. So because we only have an hour, and what we do is we email and we work out the times, but we also set an agenda, which is, I guess, my responsibility as a student. This is my opportunity to reflect on my classes and my teaching. And so, they're very broad, I guess, questions that I have that I'm struggling with in that class in terms of, how to make them the most effective. And so I send her, my list of broad questions or objectives, and then we kind of discuss them and have just a fairly free-flowing conversation about those issues, but with some kind of agenda. And she describes that she uses, a motivational interviewing type style. So I guess she would probably say her role is to support me in my teaching, and to encourage me and to get me to reflect. It's that bouncing back ideas with somebody who understands, I guess, where I'm coming from in how I want to teach this particular class. But she also has a wealth of knowledge because of her experience in teaching in the US, and she teaches a lot of teacher trainings and has such a wealth of experience in mental health. So it's great to draw on that as well. To get some ideas that perhaps I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, I have a mentor, not particularly for yoga, but a mentor, and it's that using them to talk about ideas and to kind of figure it out that I think is just incredibly valuable, but you also have to find someone that you're compatible with, if that's the right word, and I think that's the important one.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I've been teaching yoga now for around 6 years, and it can be a very lonely, experience. I did teach at a studio here, and I shared a lift down with a co-teacher that she would teach in the back room and I would teach in the main room on a Wednesday evening. And that was just a lovely opportunity to kind of talk to somebody, about our classes and about our teaching in general. But I stopped teaching at that studio when I went back to my counselling work. And so I kind of really missed that connection to other yoga teachers. And even though I still see people socially and still, catch up, she's a very good friend, Vanessa at Yoga Spirit, who teaches wonderful prenatal classes there. But it's still not the same as having that dedicated space to reflect on your own teaching, because it was happening kind of incidentally. So it is, I think, worth making that commitment that, for me, it was making a commitment to my teaching to step back a little bit from it and have that luxury, I guess, of reflecting, what am I doing? Is it the most effective it can be? What are the challenges that I'm facing? What could I be doing differently?
Yeah, I think you've really grabbed the essence of it, which is the reflection, to really think about what you're doing and what you want to achieve. And it can be in my experience, it can be about the last thing that happens. You're just running around trying to get people to class and to give them the correct stuff and all of the rules and regs and everything. And to actually sit down and think about, well, what have I done and what do I want to achieve, I think is really rare because of time, constraints and stuff. So I think you're doing a really smart thing to have a mentor and being able to really take that time to reflect and reflect with someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I found that even though we focused on that particular class that I teach as part of my role as a counsellor, I do a couple of other classes as well. And, the benefits also flow into those classes, even though we might not talk about them specifically. The ideas still tick along and there are benefits to all of the classes that I do.
So really, it's so valuable. I'm a bit envious, actually. I would love to do that. Well, let me just go into one other thing I'd really like to talk about, which is that you are interested in, and I believe studying something on optimum brain health. Now, I assume that that's different from good mental health, but I could be wrong. So is that, how would you define that, optimum brain health?
It's not really a thing in it. I guess it's just a way of phrasing, good. It is good mental health. But often we think of the good mental health or bad mental health. We have that dichotomy, I guess, of you're either one or the other. Whereas the reality is there's a spectrum that we all, experience, that we all from time to time have low mood. We all from time to time feel anxious and worried about things. And that this is a normal, way of being in the world. And I think, optimal brain health is about recognizing that we're all going to have different challenges and struggles mentally as well as physically in our lives. And being resilient. So I guess, the optimal brain health is really about the resilience building. How can I, face whatever struggles that might appear with grace?
So it's not, I was assuming it was something like, having good memory and that kind of thing, but it actually is the mental, your emotional ability to get through bad times, shall we say, in a very simplistic way.
Yeah, and I think, you're right. The memory is a part of that. Certainly in a university setting, it's really important that people have that effective recall, and that people have that ability to, focus on what they're doing and be able to access those memories when they need it. But often I think if you manage stress well, then that will happen as well. So you can't kind of separate out, techniques that are good for memory as opposed to techniques that might be good for other parts of brain health. I think they're so interrelated.
You actually work at a university as a counselor, and so you're working with all of these, I assume. Well, although you did say that you had mature age students too, so it sounds like you'd be working with a wide spectrum of ages, shall we say.
Yeah, obviously there are a lot of younger students, and there's also a lot of international students, so it's a wide range of ages and backgrounds.
There's also going to be a wide range of knowledge about yoga. Have you found there are misconceptions about yoga that come from this group? And it's a pretty big group, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what I find interesting is a lot of students who come from China have a yoga practice. Yeah, Yeah, which is really interesting. It seems to be a very asana-focused yoga practice, very focused on flexibility. And so I was interested, I guess, when I discovered that they had this experience of yoga. And I always talk about yoga as being, and I know we're in a podcast and you kind of can't see my arms, but, being, I've stretched my arms out wide and saying, yoga is this big, and the things that you can do in a class, are kind of teeny tiny. You can bring your fingertips just kind of close together, and it's like that's what you can share in a class. But so yoga is lots and lots of different things to lots and lots of different people. And I think for me the key is to be very clear about what little slice I'm sharing, and that's one little slice. So that doesn't negate the things that people might have done in the past. And certainly a lot of the younger people also will practice in the gym, and they will also have a more physical or a stronger practice. And I always say that, they're all complementary. They all have a slightly different focus, but it's all still yoga because, it's such a broad term.
If someone wanted to start a class like yours with this really wide, diverse group of people, age-wise, fitness level, sounds like wellness levels, what would be, other than being very, very clear about what it is, what would you tell them if they wanted to do that?
What I find useful is to continually remind students, no matter what class it is, but this class in particular, to listen to their bodies. I often make that comment that it's not synchronized swimming, that I don't expect us to all be doing the same thing in the room. And so I think that's a really useful thing for us as teachers to remember, is to give students permission. And I was talking to some of my students in my gentle class that I do on a Thursday morning, who are often older students, and I was asking them about, what benefits they get out of yoga and what, what they enjoy about the classes. And one of the students said that it's the constant reminders and the constant permission to do something different to everybody else. And so I think that's a really important thing for, whenever you have a diverse range of people in the room, is to make sure that it's a safe space, to make sure that those people know that they have permission and that it's a genuine permission, that if they need to stand up or sit down when everybody else is doing the opposite, that's okay. If they need to stop moving while everybody else is still moving, that's okay. If they want to try and explore something quite different, that's okay too. So I think it's, I emphasize that very regularly because I think people need to hear it again and again and again. And I think that's one of the things as teachers that we can remember, is to give that permission.
Yes, I think that's wonderful advice, because I teach older people, and of course they're going to have a really diverse bodies. As we get older, they get even more diverse. So yeah, I really think that's a wonderful piece of advice. Maureen, I'm going to tell people how they can get a hold of you. Is there anything else that you would like to either tell our listeners or talk about or discuss?
I guess the only other thing is, when I was reflecting on, what interesting things I might have learned over my yoga journey to share with other people, I think the more I learn about yoga is the more I know that what I don't know. And I guess the more I've learned to keep it simple, and to kind of bring things back. I think when I was younger in my teaching, or when I was a newer teacher, I was so excited to try and share everything. And I think one of the things that I've developed as a teacher is that confidence of taking it back and simplifying things, and not kind of oversharing too much in one particular class. So that's probably the only other, thought that I had when I was thinking about our conversation, that, might just be a good reminder for myself to hear out loud again, but for other people, is that there's so much to yoga, but it can be really useful just to kind of keep it simple.
Okay. I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, it is. Sometimes it's hard not to give it all. Just kind of blurp it all
absolutely.
out at once. And really, if you have long-term students, they will get it over the long term as you bring new things in and work with them. So I agree. I'm kind of like, the more I know about yoga, the more I understand what I don't know about yoga, because it just gets bigger and bigger every time I try to understand something. So if you, pardon?
It's an interesting phenomenon, isn't it, how that happens?
It is. It is, yes. Because you're going, oh gosh, that means something different than the last time I looked at it, you know. If any of you would like to contact Maureen, or about her classes or whatever, you can email her at Banksia Yoga, and that's BANKSIA Yoga, all one word, at gmail.com. Or she has a website, again, banksiayoga.com, and her Facebook page is also called Banksia Yoga. And it was a great conversation. I love these conversations. You never quite know where they're going to go, but I loved hearing about the mentoring, because I think that's really important to be able to find someone that you can reflect with. Because I agree with you. I think being a yoga teacher, if you don't work in a large studio or a studio with other teachers, it can be a very lonesome, lonely kind of thing. And so I'm really glad that you brought that aspect up. So thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful interview. Now for the listeners. To be part of changing the face of yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies, please take a picture of yourself doing your favorite yoga pose and email it to ctfoy@yogalikeness, all one word, .com.au. That is ctfoy@yogalikeness.com.au with your first or full name. I will upload it to the Instagram folder, Changing the Face of Yoga. So we will have an album of the spectrum of students who represent the face of yoga. Please download and review this podcast and tell your friends who might be interested. Thank you, and let's get together next week.